In this video, I'll provide an introduction to VMware Cloud on AWS. So let's start with this concept of public, private, and hybrid deployment. Right? So many of you are probably familiar with the traditional on-premise data center. This is an environment in which you've got your own physical servers, you've got your own storage systems and networking systems, and everything is physically located on-premise in your own data center. And then, of course, we've got the cloud model as well. Right? Here we see the AWS Cloud, and this is a partner environment where you have a service provider such as AWS that is providing all of the physical servers, all of the storage capacity, all of the networking between those components, and a variety of other functions, right? Physical security, electricity. They're providing all of that stuff as a cloud solution. And then we've got the hybrid data center model. And that is one that VMware Cloud on AWS is particularly well suited for. A hybrid environment is when we're going to maintain our on-premise data center. Right? That's not going away. So we're still going to have things like ESXi hosts and a vCenter instance running in this on-premise data center. Those things still need to work. And they need to be able to communicate with our resources that are in the AWS cloud. So we can set up a VPN. We can use AWS Direct Connect. We've got a few different options of how we can make this work. But this is really a great way to support that hybrid cloud solution, is to use VMware Cloud on AWS. It's also a great way to eventually transition to more native resources on AWS, because the AWS environment and the VMware Cloud on AWS environment are very tightly integrated. So we have a lot of great options there. But those are three terms that you really need to understand, right? Private cloud, that's our on-premise data center that is virtualized. Public cloud is a service provided by a third party, such as AWS. And hybrid is when we have a little bit of each. Okay, so what is the VMware Cloud on AWS? Well, it's a way that you can run your familiar VMware infrastructure inside of the AWS cloud. You can use the HTML5 client to access vCenter and modify your VMware inventory the way that you're accustomed to doing. Right? So you really get the best of both worlds. Right? You get all the VMware tools and architectures that you already know. You get everything from VMware Cloud Foundation, including vSAN, NSX, right, and vSphere. But on top of that, you get access to many AWS services, and you also get tight integration with another AWS account if you want, a traditional AWS account, so that you can launch services within AWS and again tightly integrate those services with the things running on your VMware Cloud on AWS and even your on-premise services as well. So the VMware Cloud on AWS is powered by Cloud Foundation. We have vSphere, we have NSX, we have vSAN, we have vCenter, all of the familiar VMware tools and functionalities that we've grown accustomed to and that provide so many awesome services like high availability and DRS. Those features are all supported in the VMware Cloud on AWS. So one of the first steps towards creating a VMware Cloud on AWS deployment is to set up a VMware Cloud software-defined data center account. Now this account is specifically VMware only, right? Your VMware Cloud on AWS deployment is going to be strictly managed by only VMware. So this is a VMware account, and this is where you'll set up these software-defined data center resources for a single customer. You will also need an AWS customer account. This is just a regular old AWS account. It can be connected to your VMware Cloud privately, and it offers the full catalog of AWS services, which is an exhaustive catalog of services. There's many, many services available there. From a purchasing and billing perspective, you can contact VMware to sign up. At the moment, the moment being October 1st, 2017, they're actually not accepting any new clients because there is so much demand for the VMware Cloud on AWS. But I expect that to change very soon as they continue spinning up this service in new regions. You will get a single bill for the VMware software and the AWS resources required to run it. Now this is a bill for your VMware Cloud on AWS account. You can still have an AWS account with AWS native resources and features. That's a completely separate account. So what VMware is going to bill you for is all of their software running on top of the AWS physical resources. But if you're running things like RDS or EC2 instances or S3 or stuff like that, that's going to be a separate account, separate bill. And that bill will be from AWS. Now, one of the things that I've heard there's a lot of confusion about is how do we actually go about purchasing VMware Cloud on AWS? Well, you've got some options that are going to be actually pretty familiar to you if you've worked with AWS in the past. So you can purchase hourly on-demand resources, which basically means you're going to choose the number of hosts that you want in your cluster, and you're going to pay for them per hour. And you only pay for the hours that you're actually running those resources. Now, of course, this is the most expensive option, right? Because you're not really guaranteeing VMware any continuous revenue. You can turn it on and off whenever you want. They're going to charge you the most per hour. If you know, hey, I'm going to need 4 hosts all year long, or I'm going to need 6 hosts all year long, you can enter into a reserved model of purchasing over the course of a year or up to 3 years. Right? And by committing to that long-term purchase of resources, they'll actually charge you up to 50% less. So significant savings if you know that you can commit to the long-term purchase of these resources. And you can select from anywhere between 4 and 16 total hosts provided in your VMware Cloud on AWS software-defined data center. Okay, another way to make this purchase a little bit more economically friendly, let's say, is something called the hybrid loyalty program. So when you look at the pricing, you may think, hey, this is pretty expensive, especially if you've already invested in on-premise licenses. Well, the good news is you can bring those licenses into VMware Cloud on AWS and get up to a 25% discount for the lifetime of that account. And you can also bring all of your existing Windows licenses in as well. So if this is something that interests you or that you think may help you make this a little bit more affordable, you can actually see all of the pricing details for this program at www.trainertests.com/cloud. I've included links to all the pricing information there. So there's a different pricing model for VMware Cloud on AWS than there is for native AWS. And at a glance, it may seem as though native AWS is a lot less expensive. But they've intentionally structured the pricing so that you can achieve basically the equivalent price whether you're using native AWS or VMware Cloud on AWS. So the VMware software allows us to oversubscribe, which means we're going to be able to get more virtual machines running on the same hardware than we would with native AWS. And that's going to produce some cost savings. And because we can enable VMware features like DRS, that'll help us to ensure that we're always getting the performance that we need. The current price for VMware Cloud on AWS is $8.37 per host per hour of on-demand access. And if you break this down over the course of a year, you're going to pay $8.37 per hour for the entire year. So that can be pretty expensive. That can add up quickly. So over the course of a year, running one single ESXi host on VMware Cloud on AWS is going to cost you somewhere over $73,000, right? About $73,300 or so. Right? That's a lot of money for one host. If we go with a 1-year reserved model, like we see here on the screen, the price gets reduced to $5.93 per host per hour. So now that single host is down to about $51,000 per year. Very significant cost savings. If we go to the 3-year reserved model, the price gets reduced even further. And so over the course of 3 years, we're going to spend about $109,000, which makes it about $36,000 per year per host. That still sounds kind of expensive when you think about how much an ESXi host costs, but when you add in the ESXi host plus software licensing plus support, plus you have to have the storage solution, right? And then you have to have the support for that as well. Plus you have to have all the networking equipment and the support for those as well, right? You have to think about it that way, because VMware Cloud on AWS is providing you not only with the hosts, but is providing you vSAN for storage and NSX for networking. And so if you think about all of those solutions and how much it would cost you per year to maintain all of those solutions in an on-premise data center, $36,000 per year starts to look pretty darn good. So we have to think about it in those terms, right? At a glance, it seems expensive. When you really think about it, though, what you're actually getting is you're replacing a lot of storage, networking, and compute costs at the same time. That's what makes this so attractive. And you're transitioning to all flash storage, right? So you're probably moving to a faster storage technology than you currently are using. So good stuff. And then you have to also consider the operational expenses that this eliminates, right? So you don't have to update ESXi, vCenter, vSAN, NSX. All of those upgrades are handled by VMware. Now you have to have an on-premise data center that is at vSphere 6.5D or later. Right? That's a requirement if you're going to do hybrid linked mode, meaning if you're going to be able to manage your cloud and your on-premise through the same vCenter server, we have to be at vSphere 6.5D or later. That gives us the ability to cold migrate workloads to the VMware Cloud. Cool stuff. So what this means is essentially you're not going to have to do any updates on vCenter, on ESXi and NSX Manager, on the NSX controller, on the edge gateways for NSX. All of those pieces are handled by VMware. That's no work for you. You don't have to think about any of that work. You can also very easily integrate with native AWS resources. So VMware Cloud on AWS runs on dedicated bare metal hardware inside of an Amazon data center. You can establish a very high bandwidth, very low latency connection to resources in the AWS cloud, which can allow you to use things like Lambda, SQS, Kinesis, RDS, EC2, all of these resources that AWS provides, and it's a lot of resources. You can utilize those and have that high bandwidth connection. So just think about it this way. Let's say that you have a database that you want to keep on your own SQL server and run it as a VM. But you want to spin up simple web servers in an auto-scaling group on AWS. Well, now we can do that. We have that level of integration. So it's really powerful. It gives you the ability to really leverage the full set of features from both VMware and AWS. And when you put those features together, you have a ton of capabilities.